Oh. X-Men 97, episode 5. This is, I think it's double length. It's definitely longer than normal. This one's a lot. In a good way. And this is the point where this show isn't just walking the balance of recapturing the feel of a nostalgic piece while downplaying some of the flaws that don't need to be carried over. This is where it takes, and like, first, let's be clear, that's already a hard line to walk. It was already being pretty successful at something that's pretty tricky. This is the episode where it steps beyond just doing that and into doing things that the original show never would have done, and if it had tried, would not have done successfully. Okay. So I'm not going to super go into detail on the plot because I really hope you've already seen it if you're watching this review. But on the off chance that like you don't feel like watching the show, but you feel like hearing me talk about it, tiny bit of context. The main thing that this is picking up on, this is not a direct follow-up to the previous episode. First of all, that has apparently been put on hold and is going to be considered running in parallel, I guess. I still don't know why they broke it up the way they did in terms of order of episodes and presentation, but like set that aside. But just for clarification on that, this is picking up on the whole idea of the mutant populated island of Genosha being recognized by the UN and picking up on that thread, as well as picking up on a couple of other smaller things that have been going on, but have been getting varying degrees of focus, some of them very minor. So it's also going to pick up on Rogue and Gambit and Scott and Jean. So those are sort of the main threads running through this. Genosha is going to be recognized by the UN and is trying to set itself up properly as a nation with a system of governance. And they want Magneto to, they don't name the position, but effectively lead them. It's very clear when Gambit, Rogue, and Magneto go to Genosha that Genosha has very much already venerated, well, both Magneto and Charles Xavier, but Magneto especially. I would say probably because he's the one who's still alive. But there's some stuff to Charles Xavier too, but there's a lot more to Magneto. And there's at the same time sort of an interview piece going on at the mansion where this journalist who, honestly, in my opinion, appears neutral, leaning towards sympathetic to the mutants. And, she's interviewing Beast and Jubilee and Scott, Cyclops. And while she is, I do very sincerely believe, being about as neutral as a journalist can ethically be, because true neutrality would involve basically not pushing back on anything. But some of the details that Scott chooses to omit, she pushes back on, which that's kind of her job. And Scott doesn't handle that very well. And he kind of snaps. Understandably, to a degree, for all intents and purposes, he has lost his son. And he's in a really messed up headspace because of the whole thing with Madeline Pryor and now, quote unquote, real Jean being back. And yet he goes off on camera saying stuff that is absolutely going to come back and bite them in the ass later because it's going to be played out of context. I guarantee that. I do think they pushed him just a touch too far on that. Like, I could believe he went off, but some of the specific things that he said, it's like, okay, that doesn't feel like what he'd actually say. That feels like writers trying to figure out, okay, what is the thing that we could have him say that will clip the best for out of context propaganda later. So like it's kind of got that reverse engineered writing problem where the writers know how they want to use what he's saying, so they come up with what could he say that would best fit what we later plan to use his words to do. But as a result, it's not actual. It's pushing credibility slightly of would he actually word it that way in the moment? I don't know. That's about one of the only minor complaints I'm going to have. Well, the other one being it's doing the Jean and Logan thing, which I've honestly never been interested in. I know, like, there's been in various versions of X-Men sort of a pseudo love triangle between Scott, Jean, and Logan, and I don't care. Normally, at this point, I might say I don't care about romantic aspects of these things. As time has gone on, I've realized that's not true. There's just a lot of tropey romantic angles that I see too much of. Those I'm tired of. And this sort of love triangle of Logan loves Jean, Scott loves Jean, and Jean kinda likes both of them, but is more in love with Scott, or at least has more history with Scott. I'm like, I've freaking seen this. This is boring. I have no interest in this. And I've never had interest in it, to be completely honest. But the reason that I'm not going to make the blanket statement of I don't like romantic stuff is because the two other romantic plots that come up are handled with shocking depth, nuance, and maturity. Because there's two things that happen. The first is that a little bit later in the episode, Scott is sort of talking through his pain of losing his son with what appears initially to be Jean. But what we find out is Madeline Pryor communicating to him telepathically from Genosha. So they're basically having a psychic interaction, commiserating over their shared loss, which Jean finds out about. And that could very easily have been handled incredibly one-sidedly. It would be very easy to do. But it doesn't. It acknowledges the problems on both sides. And I don't mean like both sides did things wrong, but I mean like the messiness of actual adult relationships. I don't mean adult as in sexual. I mean like adult interactions, romantic relationships between adults are messy and they're not clean cut. And Scott does have a certain point that she understands his loss because she was there. She was the one who gave birth to his kid. Regardless of anything else, he knows that. For all the jumbled up memories and not sure when Madeline came in, whose memories are real about what part, they know that part for a fact. So him maintaining some kind of connection with her for just the shared grief is maybe not a wise thing, but it's a very understandable thing. It's a very human thing. And then Jean's anger at that, especially at having it hidden from her, and from her perspective, the idea that this sort of psychic bond and communication was their thing. That's her and Scott's thing, which, you know, I would say is fair for her to feel betrayed, but at the same time, like, Madeline Pryor at this point is still you. Like, she'll branch off, she'll become her own person as time goes on. Hopefully, but like right now, it's weird to lay a claim on that, but at the same time, it's a very understandable and very human reaction. They're both having very human and understandable and volatile reactions to what is going on in a way that does not clearly paint one or the other as the one who's wrong. That and like, that's not to say that people won't have their opinion of who's in the wrong. I'm sure they will. But I think the fact that it's nuanced enough to at least have a conversation and the show does not feel like it is objectively pointing at someone and going, that's the one who screwed up. Because also, early in the same episode, Jean kissed Logan. So clearly, she's got her own messed up stuff that at present, Scott doesn't know about either. So there's just a level of depth and nuance I would not have expected. And similarly, with the newly evolved love triangle between Gambit, Magneto, and Rogue. Now, the one thing that I would have appreciated if the show had done more to address is the age gap between Magneto and Rogue doesn't really get a look in, and it kind of makes me uncomfortable. And again, like, age gaps are not inherently unethical, but especially in a case like this where he has a wealth of experience, and at the time they started a romantic relationship, she was effectively under his tutelage. There's a massive power imbalance there that I'm not comfortable with. That having been said, there is an element brought into it that, at least, and I kind of wish they would have made the point that I'm about to make. They didn't, but at least it's there to be made, which is that the tipping point for her was realizing that his control of electromagnetic fields meant he could touch her without her powers kicking in. He could shield himself from her powers and they could come in physical contact. And I can buy just the fact that she was able to do that with somebody, with anybody, would immediately be something that she would gravitate towards and want, need even, depending on where she is at the point in her life. So that is good to have in there because it gives her a reason to get in with Magneto that isn't just the idolization and the power imbalance, somehow being taken advantage of. That's not to say that it completely negates that issue, but at least gives something else that is obviously very powerful for a character like Rogue. And then, of course, we have Gambit, who's becoming aware of this and seeing, Rogue being asked by Magneto, will you stay and rule here with me? And Gambit, who has been doing his best to be there for Rogue, who loves her, but at the same time, as she herself points out, I can't touch you. Like, that is not a small thing. That's massive. That's huge. That is a fundamental part of connecting with people. Now, not everyone has a need for touch. Some people are actually touch averse, and that is fine, to be clear. But it is made very clear that Rogue is someone who wants contact. She wants touch. She wants that warmth. She wants to be able to express herself and to have affection towards her expressed in a physical way, and she can't. So the fact that she can't touch him and he can't touch her, that is a big problem. And she sells the fact that it's a big problem. While at the same time, Gambit has reason to be upset and frustrated too, because he's done everything that she's asked effectively. He's been there and he's been there for her. He hasn't strayed. He hasn't gone for anyone else. And it's not enough because someone else can offer her something that he can't. And again, that complication, that dynamic, that sense of like, okay, so as a person, I think she likes Gambit a fair bit more than Magneto, but there's some core fundamental thing that is missing from Gambit that she could have with this other relationship. And that, again, has the messiness and the complications and the not a clear cut, somebody is definitely right, somebody's definitely wrong. It's acknowledging that it's all a mess. So this episode was already really good and really powerful before the frigging kaiju-sized Sentinel shows up and starts killing everybody. And I do mean killing. This thing has a body count. One of the fun things about Genosha, I didn't mention this, is, and they were kind of using Morph for this before, but now they can have a bunch of Easter eggy references and appearances by mutants who aren't going to be part of the regular cast or might not otherwise appear at all, but they can appear here. And we also get Nightcrawler. Kurt, I love Kurt. Kurt Wagner is like, he's probably my favorite regular character on the X-Men, since Mystique is usually at least villain leaning. But I love Kurt. He's fantastic. And he's fun here as well. But there is so much destruction and there was a lot of weight to it. It's never presented as like, ooh, look at the spectacle of us blowing stuff up. Isn't this fun? No, this is not fun. This is harrowing. We took the time. I think it was very smart for this to be double length. And honestly, very smart to air it as one thing and not a part one and part two. I think it was really smart to do it all together. Because I think it would have lost its momentum if you broke it at the halfway point. But seeing the hope and the happiness of Genosha before it all starts getting destroyed. And in hindsight, I feel like I should have realized it was going to get destroyed. This is basically panning over and going at, boy, sure hope nothing bad happens here. That imagery would be way too poignant if we were to destroy this beautiful place of happiness and hope. Yeah, sure would be. So, like, I feel like in hindsight, I should have realized that this was going to happen. But they sold the hope so well that I allowed myself to hope too. And then this. And the weight given to the people who fall. I'm not going to make the call that Magneto is dead. I feel like there's enough ambiguity on that. He might not be. He might have figured out something to do to save the Morlocks who were huddled around him. But also maybe not. We'll see. Gambit really does appear to be dead. Which, that's bold. It's a big thing to kill off a lead character. And first of all, what a way to go. What a moment of absolute glory. Painful, because he's skewered by this frickin' thing, and he's dying. And he just charges the entire Sentinel with kinetic energy and blows the entire thing to hell. He's not going to make it, and he knows that. But he can do this, so he does. That was really, really strong. And honestly, even prior to that, Cable appears super briefly to try and warn everybody. There's just a brief moment between him and Madeline, and it's quick. And Cable is a character who does nothing for me. Like, he's almost never worked for me. Super brief appearance here, and it works. Because Madeline looks into his eyes and realizes who he is. And then, of course, at the very end, Rogue holding Gambit and crying. You know what got me? It's getting me again, thinking about it. Her calling him sugar. There's something about the painful recitation of a pet name between two people. And like, he's not the only one she ever called sugar, but still. Something about that. That hurt. Like in a good way. In a powerful way. I think, I think the show's going to have a hard time topping this. But even if the other episodes are not as good as this, hot damn, this makes the project worth it. This makes this revival worth it, in my mind. X-Men 97, Episode 5. What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. Those all help me. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here. But you can come on back next time you need a break. Now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Goddess Elida, Oliver B., Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Fare Forit, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris, Melinda Walters, Jen, OnDecade808, Becky Sparks, Fernabilax the Poodle, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Kasparov, Dave Hall, White Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Toku Bluhuvian, Pau Barabajago, and Mara G. Thank you for your support and for keeping me and these guys fed. What are you doing?